Hi, Bob Anderson back again. Today I'd like to take you through what we call the due diligence. So what is due diligence? Well, it's checking out a deal to see, is a deal a deal? Should we proceed with it? Should we put our money into it? Should we do it? Will it be bankable? Well, pretty important stuff, and that's what we need to know. So that's what we call DD. If you see the letters DD, well, it's just short for due diligence. Now, basically, due diligence comes in two parts. We've got the physical aspects, if you like, of the potential site, and then we've got the numbers. There's two parts. Numbers are very important, but so is the other stuff. So what I'd like to take you through is just some basic steps in the due diligence process, and then I'll relate it back to the particular case study that we're doing at the moment, the 4 townhouse project. Now, I always say there's 3 boxes up front that you need to get ticked. Those 3 boxes are zoning, size and frontage. What do I mean by that? Well, zoning, if you're not sure what zoning is, within any council area there'll be if you like, a planning scheme, and within that scheme there's all various zonings. It shows you what you can and what you can't do with land. Obviously, if it's an industrial zoning, well, you can do sheds and factories, but you can't have a residential apartment block. So zoning is important. In normal residential development, you might only be dealing with one particular zoning, that's residential, and there's some sub-zonings, and you might only be dealing with 1 or 2 of those. So not too hard, but zoning is important. If you're going to do some townhouses, well, you better have the zoning that's right for townhouses. So that's the first tick of the 3. Second one is size. Is size important? Well, you better believe it is, because there will be a minimum size that you can develop on. So, for instance, you might have the right zoning, but the lot, the block of land, is a bit too small for you to do townhouses. There'll be a minimum lot size. And the third tick the box is the frontage. In other words, how wide is it? And you could have the first 2 boxes ticked. It could be the right zoning, the right size block in square metres, but it could be a very long, narrow block. And it might be very difficult or even impossible to design, let's say, townhouses on that block. So frontage is important. So what you'll find in any planning scheme, there'll be the right sort of zoning, if you like, a minimum lot size for doing that particular development, and frontage. There'll be a minimum frontage to make it all work. If you can't get those 3 boxes ticked, can't really go any further. So the next thing we need to decide is, well, what are we going to do to it? Okay, we've got a residential zoning. It's big enough, frontage is good enough. What's happening? Are we doing townhouses? Are we just going to cut the block in half? So it could be a little subdivision, or it could be that we're going to put some townhouses on it. That's the sort of product. Once we know that, we need what we call the yield. Now, you see, we need all these things before we can do the numbers. So what do we mean by yield? Yield is the number of things. If you were cutting a single block of land into 2 blocks, the yield is 2. If you're going to do 3 townhouses on a block of land, the yield is 3 townhouses. Yield is the number of things that you get out of it. So we know we've got zoning, size, frontage, that's good. Product townhouses, how many can we fit on it? That'll depend obviously on the particular planning scheme for that area. Who's the expert? Who do you go to? Well, a town planner or an architect can tell you that straight away. In fact, in some councils, it's a very simple process, a very simple little formula. You could learn how to do it quite easily. It just depends on the council. Once we know that, we can do the numbers. But the other thing to look at is what we call services. So things like sewer and water and town water, those sorts of things, electricity. Look, just about all my students are doing what we call infill development. So what are we doing? We're generally, we've got an old house on the site, we might be renovating it, putting 1 or 2 properties in the backyard or 3 or whatever. We might even be knocking down the old property and building some new townhouses. So there's going to be services there. But the 2 ones we've got to particularly watch, particularly when we're doing multi-units, like maybe 3 townhouses or 4, is that we can get connection to stormwater and sewage, those sorts of things. There's always an expert. Look, a town planner can help you, an architect can, but the real expert, civil engineer. Plenty of them out there to give you some advice, or better still, let me teach you. Let me teach you all the ins and outs of this so that you can do it right, do it safely, do it right. So knowing those things, zoning, size, frontage tells us, is it worth looking at more? Yes, it is. Product townhouses, how many? Well, 4, let's say. Services, yep, they're good. Now we can do the numbers, the financial feasibility. And later on in this series, I'll actually take you through all those numbers, a complete breakdown. So that's what we do to do the due diligence. You know, one of the great things about due diligence, there's always an expert to lean on. Town planner, architect, civil engineer, whoever it is, we can lean on these experts. We don't have to be the expert. We just have to have a knowledge of what we're looking for. We don't have to know all the answers. We can lean on other people for that. And so So that's the basic process of the due diligence. If everything comes up trumps, hey, we're in. The numbers look good, services are right, everything's sweet, let's proceed. And that's the DD. Now this particular case study that we're doing, the 4 townhouses, it was the right zoning, 4 townhouses. It was the right size. The minimum lot size in this particular council happened to be 600 metres. This one was 750 something square metres. So it was big enough. Frontage was 15 metres frontage. Now that was the minimum frontage. I would have liked it to have been a bit wider, even if it was a bit shorter at the back, but that's okay. I hit the right zoning, bigger than the minimum size and equal to the minimum frontage. I had a deal. Product, well, I decided townhouses. Yield, had to talk to the architect, had a pretty good clue anyhow. It was going to be 4 townhouses. Wasn't quite sure of the mix here. I wanted to be able to get a couple of 4-bedroom townhouses, a couple of 3-bedroom ones in there, but at least I knew I was going to get 4. Check the services out. This particular project was very easy. It was almost level, rose up a little bit from the front to the back, which is perfect. The sewer was in the footpath, the storm water was out the front and the gutter in the footpath. The water, the pressurised water, the town water, it was actually, the main was on the other side of the street. Now we had a branch coming off to this old house that we were buying, but it was a small branch. It wouldn't actually feed 4 townhouses. So as it turned out, we actually had to bring a 40 mil, as it turned out, 40 mil pipe, if you like, from the other side of the street off the main across to ours. A little bit of a cost in that, we'll talk about that later. But the services were fine, no dramas there. And so did the numbers, tightened up the numbers now, more, now that we've got it under contract, subject to 14 days due diligence. Remember that from the last episode? It all stacks up, all looking good. Now we can tick the due diligence box, and now we're moving on to finance and approvals. So I hope you're really enjoying this case study. I'm hoping you're learning about the different processes of property development. And I look forward to catching you again shortly.